Well, hello everybody. Welcome. It is the RambleCast. This is April 24th, 2024. And wow, it just occurred to me that those numbers all line up in a neat little package. So, I'm your host, Cody Toombs, and with me, I have Corbin Davenport.
Hello.
Corbin sounding enthusiastic as ever.
Yeah, it's okay. I've got a half of a milkshake left, so we're good.
Oh, crap. It just occurred to me. I totally forgot to make tea. Oh well. That's fine. I'll survive. I'll battle through it. So
As always. Yeah, sorry, that's just my face.
resting depression face.
Some people have resting bee face. I just have just thinking about how sad capitalism is.
Don't we all?
This is after work for me. Fresh on the mind.
No, I very much get that. It's hard not to look at any news lately and immediately go, "Hey, capitalism failed us." Oof. Metric Brawl hitting deep with that one.
I don't know what that is. I'm white, I guess.
No, you look like you belong in Romania.
There's just the hat.
There's
I usually don't wear a hat, but I did get my hair cut, and so it's gonna look ugly for the next week or two. So.
Meanwhile, I haven't had a haircut in forever, which is why it looks ugly. But hey, it is what it is.
But you've always got the hat, so it's fine.
I mean, the beanie is on brand.
Yeah.
To be fair, I do rock a different hat when I go out. Though I need to change that hat because it is literally just a random Synology, baseball cap kind of, or whatever hat. Yeah, I need to get something that is not just outright shill advertising for a company that I just happen to have done some reviews for.
This one is Animal Crossing. But the light
hides the
doesn't show that.
Yeah.
So.
Drop the merch. Actually, one of these days, I've joked about it and I am somewhat serious. One of these days, I swear, I'm going to arrange to have some hemp beanies made as merch because it just feels like something that needs to happen.
And I will eventually do Tactile's merch. At least just stickers of the logo. Would probably be the end of it. Anyway,
yes.
There was some fun VR, AR, XR headset shenanigans. So, of course, the thing I was talking about, I have opened one of the articles, but not the other one, so I need to go grab that.
Okay, well, shall we start with the Meta news, or shall we start with the Apple news?
Yeah, we can do the Meta one.
Okay.
I just need to, for some reason, I closed one of the, there it is, okay. Alright, so, kind of an interesting, at least interesting to me, maybe not other people as much. Interesting to me move in that Meta announced that it's basically turning, I saw The Verge describe this as Meta becoming the Windows of VR. To me, it's a little bit closer to being the Android. So what they've done is Meta has their Quest VR headsets, that have pass-through, so it's like augmented reality 2, whatever. They have the headsets. Those run a very custom version of Android with all of their own services. And I think up until this point, it's just been called Quest software. It didn't really have a name.
I thought it's been Meta Horizon OS for a while.
No. Nope, that's a new name. The news here is that they are going to license that operating system to other device manufacturers. and at the same time they will. It sounded like to me, they talked a little bit in this article about different types of hardware, but they mostly talked about Snapdragon's or Qualcomm's Snapdragon chips for headsets. So they talk about like the Snapdragon XR2 Gen 2 platform in here, which is the chipset in the Quest 3. It kind of sounds like they might let other device manufacturers like maybe pick different chips, because Qualcomm does have a newer one of these. I think is the XR2 Plus Gen 2. I don't know. I forget. But it sounds like basically how this will work is probably closest to how like Google runs Chromebooks, where if I'm like HP, I can go to Google and say, hey, I'd like to build a Chromebook, and Google will be like, great, here's the operating system, here's one of the few chipsets you can use, go have fun. So it sounds like that's what they're doing here. They're licensing the operating system, which is now called Meta Horizon OS. That's not a good name. In a vacuum, it's kind of a cool name. I think I like Horizon, but that's the name of their stupid like social VR app with the bad graphics that everyone bullies Zuck over. So I don't know if I would necessarily want to associate it with that, but that's what they're doing. And they talk about how it's still based on Android open source project, and headsets with this will the one thing that's interesting to me is it's not clear what would be different about the headsets running this compared to what Meta already sells, because right now they sell two headsets. They sell the budget Quest 2, and then they sell the higher end Quest 3, which has the better pass through and a better chipset and better graphics, all that fun stuff. Nice balloons.
Okay, because I counted to 2 on my fingers before getting to 3, because I got to point out they also sell the Meta Quest Pro.
Yes, yeah.
So
yeah, which is a weird like in between thing that doesn't make sense for almost anyone to buy except like a couple companies, and also they are better for VR chat.
Yes,
because that is the only Quest headset with face tracking. So you can relay your face movements. Kind of cool.
But yeah, still, it is 3, not 2.
Yeah. So
regardless, they're basically all the same, just specced up in one way or another.
Yeah. It's really just there's a big hardware performance usability difference between the 2 and the 3, and then the Pro is like this weird like spec wise it's between the 2, but with the better tracking stuff. Anyway,
it's the niche.
So yeah, so not really clear what other headsets can do. If like, is this an Android situation where they could add like a lot of custom software on top and change how the OS looks and all that fun stuff? We don't really know yet. So they talk about, they have a couple examples of companies they're going to work with. They say Asus is building a quote, all new performance gaming headset. Don't know what that means. Don't know if, and there's not like really images of any of these. There's some like basic renders, but it's not even clear to me that like they're of the products that are going to come out. And actually below the pictures, they say not an actual product render. So, probably just whatever they wanted to whip up. So,
I mean, that image, I don't think anyone was going to assume it was a real product render, because man, it looks like a lazy hand-drawn effort.
Yeah. So Asus is making one. Lenovo is making one that they say, it says Lenovo will draw on its experience co-designing the Oculus Rift S, as well as deep expertise in engineering leading devices like the ThinkPad laptop series, to develop mixed reality devices for productivity, learning, and entertainment. So I'm guessing the Lenovo one might be closer to like Apple Vision Pro, like productivity thing rather than a gaming thing. But Lenovo does have a gaming sub-brand, so maybe.
Also, evidently, it is designed very specifically so that people can have a ponytail in one perfectly located position.
That's very considerate. So, and then the last one they mentioned is they are going to make a limited edition Meta Quest that is Xbox branded, because there's the Xbox cloud gaming app on Quest now, which it looks like it's either a Quest. I think that's a Quest 3, but it's black and green instead of white. At least based on the image. Again, that might change. But the cloud gaming app kind of sucks, so I don't know if that's a good sell. Anyway, so yeah, this is really interesting to me because Google and Samsung for the past, at least the past year, I think maybe two, has been working on a mixed reality platform that is supposed to be the Android of this. Like, it will probably be something similar to the Vision Pro in that it will probably have the Google Play Store and be able to run 2D Android apps in a like AR environment, just like the Vision Pro has iPad apps, and presumably some games. I don't know, because there's no VR games on the Play Store right now, and after Stadia, I think Google might have a little bit of a tough time getting game developers to repackage their stuff for another platform, even if, again, it's still Android based, so a lot of developers would just hit recompile on their Unity projects and add in all the like Google Play billing stuff, but still, that's work. And of course, Google had the Daydream VR platform like 5 years ago and was working on standalone VR stuff for that and kind of ditched that. So they could have done this already. They could have already been here, but they chose not to. So we don't know yet if that would be a platform that other manufacturers would be interested in, or if just like there would just be like a Pixel headset and a Samsung headset, or maybe just one. But this is Meta like trying to beat that to the punch. They're doing exactly what Google does with Android, where it's like, we have the operating system, we've tested it on the chipset, we have a store with games in it, we have a baked in social platform. You can build stuff with this. So, and one very interesting bit about that's kind of buried in this blog post is along with a more open app store, Meta Horizon OS will continue to give people more choice in how to access apps. And they talk about like the game streaming, Steam Link, AirLink, and then they say, and we encourage the Google Play 2D App Store to come to Meta Horizon OS, where it can operate with the same economic model it does on other platforms. So they're like nudging Google to let them have the Play Store on this. There was an article a couple months ago where I think it was like a Q&A with someone from Meta, and they said that they went to Google and they were like, hey, can we have the Play Store on Quest? And Google said no. So this is them doing what Google does with Apple and iMessage. Be like, hey guys, it's pretty fun over here if you want to come play with us. Which would be, I'd like that. The Quest has basically no apps. there's like nothing on. It's like the Quest operating system, for all intents and purposes, is a web browser and a game launcher. That is like its only functionality right now. And they've said they're like reworking at least the main window management stuff, but there's like no apps on there, and you can't even like the web browser isn't even that good. Like, it's not like Chrome on Android where you can have progressive web apps that work, kind of like native apps. It's missing a lot of that stuff. So I think this is interesting because it's setting up a like basically three-way race in this in the headset arena, because we have Meta, which has all the games. This is like the most popular VR platform now. There's PC only stuff that's missing, but it's like very popular. Game stores popping off, no apps, absolutely nothing, but would be licensed to other companies. So we have that. We have Samsung and Google doing something. Don't know what yet. It sounds like if they have the Play Store on there, which I would expect them to, that would have a lot of apps, but probably missing most VR specific apps and games. So kind of a different segment there, unless they can catch up to Meta. I have kind of doubt that they will, because this is Google and they can't really commit to anything. And then number 3, we've got Apple with Vision Pro, which has basically no games and iPad apps, and also it's inaccessible to most people, and not selling well, as we'll get to. So it's very, very interesting. Basically, Meta's gonna try to swoop in and cover all the use cases and license everything to become the Android of this segment.
And for obvious reasons, I don't blame them. They're doing the smart thing by trying to basically block out everybody else. They're trying to eclipse all the avenues that any other company could possibly use to sneak in and become relevant. I mean, this is what Facebook does, just like what Microsoft used to do. The embrace, extend, extinguish strategy, but a different version of it. What they're going to try to do, obviously, is win by having more games. They're going to try to win by having a relatively open app store. They're going to try to win by, copying every neat feature that shows up, like they did against Apple. Basically, yeah, they're just going to try to do everything everywhere all at once. And yes, sorry, I had to do that.
Because like the thing I was thinking about specifically with software is like, if I'm let's say Google and Samsung's thing is going to be able to be licensed. I would assume it would be, because that's how all of their other platforms work.
Yeah.
So operating under that assumption, if I am Lenovo and I'm like, all right, I'm going to build a VR headset, I have 2 options here. I can choose between Google's thing, which I'm assuming will have most 2D Google Play apps and some games, but basically no purpose-built VR and AR stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Or I can build a headset with Meta's thing and have something that already has Beat Saber on it and the 5 other VR games people care about. I mean, I think I would go with that one. I don't like Meta whatsoever, but like that's the stronger product.
In terms of business strategy, just straight up business strategy, it makes a lot more sense to go with Meta, because all you have to do is build the hardware and do the drivers, and then whatever custom software you actually want to do. Whereas if you go with what we expect or what we assume is going to be the Google Samsung platform, then whatever they do, you're probably going to have to build a whole lot more, and you're going to be reliant on other developers turning around and wanting to support that platform. That is a lot of dependency on both yourself and others, which you just don't really have with the Facebook situation. Meta. If Meta does something, you have relative confidence that, I mean, you can see it. Like, the platform is done, or effectively, and there's an ecosystem. Like, there are games, there are apps, period. Like, you don't have to question it. They're there.
Yeah, it's a somewhat mature software platform. Again, like the actual like OS is not very good, but like it gets you to the games, and there's a lot of games because that's what Meta's been subsidizing for years.
Austin, to be fair, I think that's already, I don't know for sure, but I'm assuming that's already on Quest.
I mean, it has a web browser and it supports like WebXR, so yeah, I'm pretty sure. I mean, I assume like all of them would have that because they're all going to have web browsers.
Right.
So okay, I haven't actually read most of the chat.
I don't think you're missing anything that's super
So
relevant to our discussion.
they said why not Ubuntu? I think when I was talking back about this running Android,
Maybe.
Android, yeah, it's mostly just because Android Meta using Android kind of goes way back to when they made the first what was it called, the Samsung Gear with Samsung,
Oh,
which
Gear
was
VR.
like their Gear VR, which was like a VR layer on top of Samsung's Android, and you put your phone in the little headset thing and put it on, and then eventually they turned that into a standalone headset that was still Android, because at that point the apps and games were written for Android, and it's just kind of continued from that point. So that's why it's in Android, and they've invested a lot of money in like reducing latency and stuff on Android, and Android has, battery life is fine, supports all the like sensors and cameras fine, so that part's good. If Corbin becomes the novice, unsubscribe. Yeah, don't worry, I will not put faulty SSL certificates on my laptops.
Give it time. So all told, I don't love to see this because it is meta. I literally just uninstalled every Meta product from every phone, every or everything I've got, because the fact they were doing man-in-the-middle attacks to spy on competitors' software, that is a hard no for me. That is exceptionally, like, that is the line too far as I'm concerned. I don't care who you are. If it was Microsoft, Google, Apple, it doesn't matter. That to me is the solid crossing of the line. So I'll put it simply, if they win the VR war, I'm not in VR. Like, it sucks, but that's how it's going to be.
Yeah, I again, like, I don't like Google controlling this space. Like, they've
I don't think Google's going to control this space.
Well, you know what I mean? Like, I don't want to be like, yeah, the company that owns all these other platforms is going to own this one too, but it's like, I don't like Meta whatsoever. So if I did, like, honestly, if the like Samsung Google thing is fine, and like enough VR stuff gets ported over and it works fine, yeah, I'd switch. I'd sell my Quest stuff.
So I'm going to venture a bit of a, not certainly not a theory, but more of a hypothetical where I could see, okay, so I think we can all agree the biggest problem here is if Google's building the OS and to some extent going to effectively own the ecosystem. The problem with this is, and you said it perfectly, the Stadia complication. Like, they tried Stadia and they blew it, and basically kind of backdoor rammed all the developers in the process. Then, going a little further back in time, look at how they screwed up Android tablets. Look at how they kind of screwed up Wear OS. Look at how they kind of screwed up TV, like actually a couple of times. They had this history. Basically, like, Android for phones is the one exception. It has been the one fluke in all of this. And obviously, like, they did web really well. These are the only two, all of these other platforms developers tried to commit to, and it ended up being, and Google Glass. I almost forgot about that one. Like, they have launched so many platforms and coaxed developers into trying to support them, and then they blew them off, if not actually outright sabotaging them.
Yeah, like they were working for a while to get like apps and games on Daydream when that was a thing. Like, I remember they made
Daydream too. God, I almost forgot that one. Well, I did forget that one. And good night, Metric Brawl.
I'll always be livid about Daydream. I might need to write that article just because it was pretty cool. I liked it. Like the main reason I didn't like it is because I had an original Pixel. That was the only phone I ever had that it worked on. It was the small Pixel, so it was not a good experience
Oh,
with the headset. But like when it was pretty cool, and they wrote that blog post that I've ended up linking to a lot when I talk about this, where they made the one standalone headset that was like a dev kit. Like they never made like any like real consumer product with Daydream as standalone, but they were working on like more like better pass through stuff, like the same thing Meta figured out like 4 or 5 years after that. They were working on better controllers. They were working on more support for more Android apps and improvements for Chrome and stuff. So like they were going that direction. If they kept doing that, then they probably own this market. Like if they kept doing that, and then they also got someone to build an okay headset, I think they would have had this.
yeah.
But they just dropped it because there wasn't any interest in like phone-based VR because it sucks. But then they didn't really try, dedicated VR either. So anyway, I'm just mad because I like Daydream. It was kind of cool, and I don't like that Zuck is owning this space right now.
So, getting back to what I was saying, I see one scenario where we kind of come out of this on the other side, where Meta doesn't end up winning, and what I think kind of has to happen is Google needs to, well, obviously Google's partnering with Samsung, but I think they need to partner with one other company too. I think they have to partner with Steam. Now, in theory, they could partner with Epic instead. I don't think that's a great scenario, but if they partner with Steam, they have to partner with somebody who has a good history with developers, who has a connection to bigger, like actual game studios, companies that want to build bigger projects. It has to be somebody that they can work with who is likely going to be a store, and basically someone who can kind of carry the torch when Google is bad at carrying the torch. Awesome. Nintendo could make a Switch VR that will destroy everyone. I mean, that's actually plausible too. Yeah.
I mean, they could if they wanted to.
Their relationship with Nvidia certainly makes that a plausible path.
Yeah, I mean they've played with it in the past. There was that like cardboard VR thing for the Switch.
I didn't even know about that.
It was bad, but
of course it was. So yeah, there are other possible entrants, but at this stage, if it's not a game console maker, then I think we know all the major players. I don't think it's going to change after this.
Yeah, I think Google could do it if like, and this is the part they always struggle with and they give up on, is they have to spend money. They just like that's and this is more in their favor than Stadia, because with Stadia they had the issue of please support a brand new game platform that is inaccessible to a lot of people, and also you need to get your game working on Linux.
Also, I'm going to throw in there the third aspect against it is you already had a ton of console and PC players who looked at Stadia and said, this is absolutely not for us. We're already really happy with the thing we have. Why would we ever go to that other thing? But go on. You were saying about Linux.
Gamers don't like to change their minds. So, yeah, but with this, Google has the advantage that all these Quest games are being built for Android already. It's just a slightly different Android.
Mm-hmm.
So the dev would have to, replace all the like payment stuff with the Google equivalents, if they're using stuff like hand tracking, I think that's all like custom meta stuff. Like that would need to be replaced with something else.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Is
But
I think Meta does have something, not at the same scale, but something akin to Google Play services, where if you want all of the stuff that is really cool and useful, that stuff is probably all locked away in Meta's platform. If you just, you know, if you're just kind of building from scratch, then okay, it's portable, but that's a lot of from scratch.
Yeah, the advantage for them is that a lot of these games are Unity, which is, you know, platform agnostic. It's on Android. A lot of the like core VR stuff is at least partially in Android because it's in the Android open source. And also in their favor is a lot of the like really popular stuff doesn't use things that are necessarily exclusive to Quest. Like you know, there's games and apps that use the pass-through and augmented reality stuff, and they use like the hand tracking stuff, but that's not most of the software, and that's like more niche. Like if they can, like a lot of the games and apps that I think you'd probably need to be comparable in the market is just, you know, normal controller stuff. You need your Beat Saber, you need your, you know, one of the VR chat apps, you need whatever that like exercise game that people really like, I forget what it's called. There's like probably like 5 or 10 you just need to make happen, and then that's good enough for most people. It's mostly Beat Saber. Like every time you look at Steam at like the VR game that's most played right this instant, it's always Beat Saber. So if they can get that, I think they're like 15% the way there just with that.
The other thing that they could do, and obviously this would also require a massive outlay of money, but go to some of the other game studios and say, look, make for us the best thing you can possibly come up with. We will fund it. I mean, that is a big ask, but you know, if they
imagining like Sundar like calling up Ubisoft and be like, hey, we're back.
That's literally the company I was thinking.
And Ubisoft's like immediately hangs up the phone.
I mean, if I were them, I probably would too. But
yeah,
you know, that's what they have to do. But they've earned so much bad will at this point. The only way is they have to lay out a bunch of money, or like I said, they could partner with somebody like Valve and, you know, get Steam directly involved in this whole thing, and then, you know, there becomes a path where it makes sense, and then they don't have to lay out a ton of money, but then they're likely cutting like a 50-50 deal with Valve on every sale or something like that. I mean, you know, which side of this fight do you want to be on?
And in terms of like getting any kind of like exclusive games and stuff, another difference here is that would be much cheaper per game than Stadia, right? Because like AAA like console PC games are so expensive to make, whereas a lot of the VR apps and games are like, they're like indie games
right now,
like
today.
But like most attempts to go past that haven't gone very far. Like Ubisoft, like they tried to make a couple VR games, and I think they said in their last like quarterly earnings, whatever, like they're done for now. Like they just don't make money. So,
well, for right now, like there's only, I'm sure there's more than this, but as far as I can name, there's exactly one thing that is not just sort of a novelty like Beat Saber, and that's Project Alice, or Alice, whatever it was called. You know, because that was like the one big thing anybody tried. And I know there have been a couple of other quote unquote big things that people tried back in kind of back in the days when it was actually just like the HTC Vive versus Uh, damn it, I was trying to think of the name of it, but whatever.
It was whatever early Oculus,
Yes,
whatever.
Oculus. Yeah, the early Oculus stuff. Yeah, there were a couple of attempts back then, but they weren't great. They were, nice attempts, but they were just so. Um, and other than that, to my knowledge, the only company that's really trying to do anything big with VR in like the actual AAA space is Sony, because obviously PSVR 2 is their hopeful next big thing. Um, and who knows? But yeah, there's
Austin said Google still owns it. Undisclosed. I might have Niantic. Yeah, Pokemon Go VR could be interesting. You would absolutely need the like Apple Vision Pro style battery pack in your pocket for that one. Battery life would be 20 minutes. I think HTC still has a VR headset. Um, I think they have I don't know if it's a standalone headset or not, but I know they still make them.
uh, on, uh honestly, I thought they sold that part off. Maybe I'm misremembering, but
The one thing I know about the Vive is, oh wait, I misspelled my Google search. Is Oh, do they still sell them? I think the Vive is the one where they were selling uh, trackers for them, like so they could more accurately measure body movements.
mhm.
And I'm pretty sure that's discontinued now. But I see people like buying them up on eBay a lot for VR check because that's like one of the few ways you can do like full body tracking in VR chat. Um, with the other options being like a different uh, like sort of hacky thing, or I saw you can use a Connect for that if you can find a Connect, which is even more old and discontinued.
I think I actually have one. Anyway,
Yeah, but yeah, Vive trackers discontinued. Yeah, so um, yeah, definitely interesting. Again, I'd like to see Google and Samsung's attempt at this. I really think, again, if they can just get a good software experience and like the five most popular VR apps and games, which I think they can. Like I don't know, I know Meta owns a few studios, but I don't think it's like the Beat Saber one. Um, I think they
yeah,
own.
no,
I think
Beat
that
Saber
I think they
preceded that.
the yeah they own the studio that makes Job Simulator, Vacation Simulator. I know that one. So if they can just get like the top five games and apps on there with the 2D play apps, I think that's a winner. But who knows? You know, they fucked this up multiple times now. So, uh, so related to the Quest, the licensing Quest OS stuff, um, Meta is also permanently dropping the price of the Quest 2 to $200. So $200 gets you a 128 gigabyte Quest 2 headset, and it's fully standalone. Got the controllers, everything. Um, and so this, I believe, this is the cheapest it's been. It's been on sale a little bit lower. The Quest 2's been interesting because they've changed the price like 6 times since it came out. Because it came out, I think, 2020 in like COVID time, so it was getting bought up a lot back then. And then they raised the price. They said to like, you know, with the assumption that it was probably being subsidized by something, and they need to actually make money at some point. And then it got lowered again, and now the Quest 3 is out, so it's gone lower and lower. Um, yeah, David said $200 bonkers. Honestly, I got my Quest 2 for $250, and that was bonkers. Like the entire time I was using is like it has issues. It's not like perfect, but it's like this is a glorified Android tablet on my face that's actually doing like pretty good like VR AR stuff. Like it's pretty good. And again, it has like all the games on it. Um, now, and now the difficult thing here and is that is the question is that is this a fire sale because they're about to replace this with something else in a similar-ish price range? And there's been a little bit of speculation that there's going to be like a Quest 3 Lite maybe, but unclear if it would be $200. Probably be more. The Quest 3 I don't think is going to drop in price anytime soon. I don't think this is like an iPhone scenario where the Quest 4 is going to come out and the 3 just kind of slowly drops into the previous range. Maybe, but I don't expect that to happen.
So you're going with the theory that it's a fire sale. I'm going to go with a counter theory that this is like that. I forget which model it was, but this is like that one iPad that Apple just kept selling. They kept selling it, and the price, the price didn't drop particularly that many times, but it was just low enough that it was like the thing everybody bought, and so it sat there for
exactly which iPad you're talking about, because it's the I think it's the 9th Gen Air, the one that they came out with like 2 or 3 years ago.
No, this is definitely older. I'm
older. Okay. All right.
No, this is so not that this gives a ton of context, but there's a podcast I am listening to. I'm way behind on it. I'm like 3.5 years behind right now. And at one time I was further behind. And when they were talking about this, I was listening to this discussion. I'd say it was about 3 years ago. So that puts this conversation about like 7 years ago.
Okay. Yeah, I mean they've done that a couple times. Like there's like especially with the iPad where like it doesn't really change.
Exactly.
So
and for some reason I want to say it was like with the A4 chip. I could be way off on that, but I think that's the one that it had. Anyway, whatever chip it was a chip that outlasted by way too much. It just kept going, and they kept supporting it, and it was an iPad that they just would not let go. So the thing is, I'm kind of wondering if that's I could see that being what Meta's going for here. They want a lot of people to be able to buy into the Quest ecosystem. So if they can make a Quest 2 and not lose any appreciable amount of money on it, or ideally they're making money on it, then keep the price as low as they can, and in doing so, just like I said earlier, they need to keep winning. If they can get every possible person onto a Quest 2, and some people obviously onto higher end models, but if they can get everybody into the Quest ecosystem, then they win. No one else there will be no air for anybody else to consume. And right now, that I could see that being as much or more the reason for dropping the price on the Quest 2 than there would be for, trying to fire sale them out and then replace it in 6 months or something. Not to say they won't do that. I mean, honestly, there's no reason not to do that too. But right now, I think their main goal is probably just to get as many people as possible on a Quest 2. Or any Quest. It doesn't have to be the 2. Just get every possible person to buy one of these, and then you take the wind out of anyone else's sails. Anyone else who comes along then has to not only convince consumers to buy their VR product, they have to convince them, hey, the one you have is already, like, you bought it, maybe you're using it, maybe you're not, maybe it's sitting there collecting dust in a drawer, but you already spent money on that one, now come spend money on ours. Like, that's a really big uphill battle for most people.
Yeah, I mean, like what does Google and Samsung do when they're done with whatever their headset is?
Mm-hmm.
Where they're like, all right, if I'm walking up to my Target store and they have the $200 Quest that has like all the games and but not really any apps, and then I look at the Samsung headset that might be $400, $500, I don't know, and has a much worse library of like VR specific software. Like that's not a good that's not
Yeah.
good for Google.
And not only that, but when you start looking at like sales figures, which stores do, I mean, a lot of displays are based around like how well does this thing sell in our store. Look, the reality is they can put up a display for whatever new thing comes from Google and Samsung, but that display is going to disappear a week later, because if they don't sell a ton of them literally day one, they're just going to look at the sales figures and go, you know what, uh we consistently sell a ton of Quest 2s and Quest 3s, let's just put those back up. And yeah, like it's just how this stuff works. And right now, Meta is on track to being the one and only serious competitor in this space.
But Samsung will have Dex. Yeah, I
Uh,
mean they could call the augmented reality stuff Dex, I guess.
yeah.
'Cause would be a bunch of poorly optimized Android apps and little windows, just like the tablet Dex.
You know, I will say, having reviewed a drawing tablet that happens to work really well with Dex, I gotta say, there that may not be a totally insane argument. I kind of see there being some potential in being able to say, look, we already have a desktop platform. It already handles Windows really well. Well, not Windows, but windowed apps. It works great with Android. It does this, it does that. The thing is, I think Meta Quest will get that feature like 4 months later. They will copy it, they'll re-implement it, assuming they don't already have it. And yeah, it'll just be a straight up copy. But, that's what would make sense. And it would actually, I think it actually would do okay, if not even well. But
Yeah. So you know, interested in, is this a fire sale? Maybe it's, like you said, like just we need a continuously cheap thing
a
because
play for dominance.
yeah, we need user number to go up, and like as long as it runs Beat Saber, it's fine. Which it does run Beat Saber. The question I have about the two also is how long is it going to be supported? Because it is now 4 years old, and Meta killed the original Quest, or I say killed. They stopped supporting their like Horizon social thing, and they stopped OS updates, but it still runs most of the software it did. So that was after about 4 or 5 years, I forget which. Now, granted, the jump from the 1 to the 2 was very significant.
Yeah,
the
that's
one
what
had
I
much
was.
weaker hardware. So I would assume
Killing a first gen
because
product is a lot easier than killing subsequent products.
they
Now, usually a lot of companies will go 2 or 3 gens before they start like real support cycles. But in this instance, if they're going to keep pushing the 2, I think they'll keep supporting it for a while.
yeah, like they've sold in order of magnitude more 2s than the 1s ever sold.
Yeah.
So I would hope that larger user base would mean longer support. And again, it's still on store shelves, so it needs to be supported for a while longer anyway.
Actually, this does bring up a weird angle. It reminds me a little bit of Windows Phone. And I'm not saying that's what's going to happen. I'm saying that if that did happen, because it could, then this would actually be kind of it like Meta's opportunity to completely screw themselves. So what I'm talking about is when Microsoft launched Windows Phone. Obviously, they launched as Windows Phone 7. It was what it was. Then they launched Windows Phone 7.5, and technically they launched 7.1. Ignore that, but then they went to 7.5, and it was weeks later, barely weeks later, that they're like, oh, and we're also working on Windows Phone 8. By the way, all you people that just bought a Windows 7.5 device, there is no upgrade path. You will not get 8, period. Sorry, tough luck. Sucks to be you. Laters. And yeah, that was, I mean, they antagonized so, well, not that many people, but they antagonized the few dozen who actually intentionally bought Windows Phone devices. And it was bad for them. It was really bad. I could see a scenario where Meta fire sales a bunch of Quest 2s, people buy them, and then like 6 months later they do the whole, oh, by the way, we're killing support for the Quest 2. Sucks to be you, suckers. And I don't think they're gonna do this. This is a hypothetical beyond hypotheticals, but if they were to do that, that would absolutely kill people's trust in Meta supporting products into the future. And yeah, someone else coming along who has a actual decent reputation for long-term support, Samsung and Google happen to now actually be those companies in a backwards kind of way. Yeah, that could actually be good for them.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, not just because like I care about this stuff now because I have one, but also like this is it's in a weird spot where it's sort of a game console, so the shorter support lifespan would be like less than what I would expect from a game, fixed game platform, whatever. But also this is like it's 4 years old and it wasn't like that high end when it came out. This has always been like this sort of like base, there's always been something better than this. This has always been like a mid-range thing. It was a mid-range thing when it came out. Now it's sort of closer to like a low end, like entry level experience. So it's always like kind of an interesting spot, and that's why like I don't really know where the support would drop off. I would hope it would be a while, but again, this is 4-year-old hardware now. Qualcomm's making much better stuff now. The chipset in the 3 is a lot better. So I don't know. It's $200 now.
The one thing I think we can confidently assume is, unlike some companies, there's no way that they're ever going to do like a trade-in deal. Bring in your MetaQuest 2 and we'll give you $100 off the 3 or whatever they come up with next. I mean, they could do that, but they're not going to. If when you start fire selling stuff, it's usually doesn't then lead to discounts.
Yeah, I have a Quest 2 and one of the controllers is like slightly fucked up, so I was gonna sell it, but for a lot less than it was. I bought it because controller. And now they've lowered the price, so it's like if I sold this, I'd maybe make like $80. So like I don't really know. Like, should I might as well just keep it. Like, it might as well just be a backup, I guess. Or I'll give it to the family or something who is okay with the messed up controller. I don't know.
Yeah. So, oh, hey Carson, how's it going? So speaking of, I don't actually. I had good transitions earlier. They're gone. But let's just make fun of the fact that Apple has their own VR headset and no one else does. Nobody else has this VR headset, just Apple. Apple made it. No one bought it. But as Ming-Chi Kuo has revealed Apparently, Apple has slashed its expectations for selling the Vision Pro, and they now expect to ship more like 450,000, or sorry, 400 to 450,000 rather than the original 700 to 800,000 units that they wanted to be able to sell. So yeah, they've slashed manufacturing plans. I'm assuming that this means that they still expect to continue making them, just they're going to stop much earlier than originally expected. And apparently they may be pushing back the second generation unit, or maybe a light unit. It's really unclear, but apparently the expectations of doing another like 2025 model have been nudged back. So
I mean, I was under the impression they wouldn't do that anyway. Like, it seemed like this was always going to be like, it's going to start out like an iPhone SE where it's just updated like whenever, and then eventually there would be like a proper cadence when it's like whatever, ready to be a normal thing normal people can buy. And maybe that would be like either around the same time they do a light model, or maybe that is the light model. I don't know.
okay, so I had different theories in mind. None of them, no particular theory really won out, but I always kind of wondered if what they might do, at least in the beginning, might be like an 18-month cycle instead of a 12-month cycle. Or they might do kind of like a TikTok release where one year they come out with like a pro version, the next year is the light version, the following year is the pro 2, then the light 2, and you just keep bouncing until such a time comes along that it makes sense to start doing both simultaneously, or you just come out with like a genericized version that covers all of it. Let's see, when will they sell all the returns as refurbs? I have a funny feeling that's probably coming real soon.
Or it's just the that's the replacement units they give you when yours breaks.
Yeah, that could be it too.
The Apple Care people.
Well, we don't know what the breakage rate is yet. I mean, we're probably never going to know that, but I have a feeling the breakage rate is probably not super high, but it might be. You never know. Regardless,
yeah,
this is looking kind of like what I think everybody predicted. Look, a lot of people snatched it up right away so that they could be the YouTubers that had the Vision Pro, and so they could do reviews, or so that they could, get in on the hype. And then I can't count how many articles and videos I saw that it was all these people saying, yeah, I went and bought this thing. I went through the return period, or got right up to the edge of the return period. Then I took it back because it just wasn't good, or it wasn't good for me, or it's cool, I like it, but man, it just isn't worth the money. Like, all those reasons, people just kept coming up with them. And here we go. Like, we're seeing the inevitable fallout, because those people returned it, and then there weren't new people to come in and buy more of them, especially since all those people saw those reviews, which kind of leads me to think Apple dumb. They really should just not have launched this until they had more figured out for it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it would have been better or worse for them to like make this strictly like a dev unit, because you do just kind of have to push it out the door at some point.
Oh, for sure.
But like, yeah, this is when it boils down, this is I talked a little bit about this in a blog post. This is the most lockdown device Apple's ever made. It is functionally an iPad on your face. It is an iPad with a lot more room to do productivity tasks, for sure. It's not like a little 10-inch iPad. and it has some really impressive applications in like media. Like, it's an iPad on your face, but it's also like very high definition TV on your face. But it is still an iPad on your face, and it costs $3,500 before tax. And it's in barely any countries right now. I think it's still only in the U.S. And it's $3,500 at a point where the you know the economy in the U.S. is still like not super great. So not a whole lot of people have this money to dump on it, even potentially people who are interested in the form factor. So yeah, I mean, this is about, I think, what everyone or most people expected. Like, shocker, expensive niche product. First generation tech product doesn't sell all that well.
So not that it's super important, but I can actually think of at least two things that were more locked down than this. Ironically,
right? Yeah, I mean, like in recent-ish history, but I guess like probably like if I'm thinking about it super hard, like
the original iPhone and the original Apple Watch, both were actually more locked down.
Yeah. But, I mean, like past couple years, but like,
well, they haven't launched anything new in the past couple of years.
Yeah, well, I was thinking like I guess I can't do a lot with the Apple TV still.
Actually, the Apple TV, both versions of it, and I mean that is in the based on iOS and the previous one that was whatever the hell that one was, those actually were not that locked down.
Zombie Mac Mini.
Yeah. But anyway, not important. I'm not trying to turn that into contradictions. But I agree with all the other principles here. It is overpriced. It is designed with very weird use cases in mind. It's suited for specific things, but not very well. But my thinking on this goes to, honestly, a really specific place. They launched this without a real gaming mode. You can have movies that are not far from what the gaming mode should be, but they don't have the gaming mode that everyone actually wants. And the same thing that you get in the Quest, like that's what they're missing. And that's what I don't understand. Why wouldn't they launch with that? They needed to have that SDK out there so that game developers could sit down, and even if it meant rebuilding a game practically from scratch, there would be game developers who would jump on that. But that's not out there. They don't have that option right now.
This is the weird thing where I guess the logic was like, VR hasn't really taken off, so if we as Apple like do kind of what everyone else did, I guess we won't take off either. So let's focus super hard on productivity. But it's like, well, then a lot of people who were buying into this form factor, why would they also get this? Because it doesn't do most of the same things. It's sort of like, every, if you want to call it successful device in this ecosystem, was like a tractor, and they made like a plane. Like it's very like just very different thing. It's very weird, and so it's not, again, kind of what everyone expected. Like, didn't sell.
Sorry, now I'm just totally picturing someone plowing their field with a plane.
Yeah,
which sounds actually kind of awesome in a really, really devastating way.
Yeah, they're just using like the jet engine blades as like weed whackers. And
I was thinking about just like lashing, like the way that they would tie plows to oxen. I'm picturing doing that to like a 747, and just like,
I mean, if it's an Airbus, it'll do it. The Delta will not. I mean, the Boeing will not last.
Boeing will just crater the entire place. Anyway, So yeah, I think they launched this a little bit at the wrong time, and a lot with the wrong expectations of what to target. Uh, which
Should have just made it a Mac.
honestly, yeah,
Like that was also the really weird thing where like they were like, guys, it's a computer. It's not for games. It's a computer. It's a computer for doing work stuff. By the way, it only has iPad apps.
yeah,
Oh, you want Photoshop on this? You want a real web browser? You want Xcode or the real Final Cut? No, you can't have that. What do you
yeah,
mean you can't get your work done in Keynote? What do you mean? Everyone uses Keynote.
yeah. So I I, I just think they completely look. I do think it is a cool device. I do think that Apple had some really smart, clever ideas here, and I think that when they do with this what they did with the Apple Watch, which is ultimately realize that their first gen product is hot garbage, because it was. Don't let anyone forget that the first gen Apple Watch was absolute gutter trash. Um yeah, I I give it, you know, a generation, and when they ship the version 2 of this, hopefully they'll have a software experience that they can go up on stage and say, yeah, we get it. You know, the first one didn't really meet people's expectations, and you know, we kind of missed the mark on that. But we have a version 2, and we know that this one's going to be a hit. Whether or not it will be, you know, that one will be left to judge. But I have a feeling that they'll see where they made a lot of these mistakes and probably do a little bit more to counter them.
Yeah, I mean it's a cool thing. If it was cheaper, I'd maybe get one. But it is one of those things also where like I'm fully expecting especially now that it has presumably it's going to be getting a cash infusion from companies licensing it. I would assume Meta's OS is gonna start looking a lot like that in the coming months.
Yeah.
And also, the Quest 3 is $500, and I'm assuming at least some of those improvements will also roll down to the Quest 2, which is $200. So, and again, like very similar thing as like iPhone Android dynamic going on here, where the iPhone was like this like very expensive phone for a while. And Google figured out how to make most of that go into like a $200 phone in 2014, and that secured them victory in many places Apple has not and probably never will.
I think it's also worth pointing out, by the time that Apple launches a Vision Pro 2 or Vision Lite, whatever, there will be a Quest 4.
Yeah.
At least very likely there will be a Quest 4, or even a Quest Pro 2 or whatever. Like, I don't think Meta's gonna be standing still on this stuff. So Apple, when they launch, I'm expecting the device. Honestly, I still think the device is going to be better. Like, the displays are going to be higher quality. They're going to have more powerful chips, but they need to have the software experience sorted. Nevertheless,
You're talking about Apple.
yeah, Apple needs to have the software experience sorted, and Meta will very likely be shipping a higher end device that is closer to Apple's standards by that point.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, like Apple started really, really high with the Vision Pro. And
Yeah.
the amount that they can climb is a lot less than what Meta can do.
Yeah.
Well, sorry,
And
the gap
and,
to the highest point. Like, Apple's already very close to as high as it's probably going to get. Meta can make some relatively easy jumps and like leap much closer to Apple, and in doing so they increase the gap, or sorry, decrease that gap.
Right.
Yeah,
Like the value proposition can
yeah,
only go
it gets a
higher for
lot
Meta.
better
Yeah.
for Meta than it does for Apple.
Yeah, like David saying $200 is bonkers. Like, yeah,
Hmm.
like I mean, the Quest 2 again, it has issues. The controller on mine's kind of broken, but every time I did use it, I was like, this is crazy. Like, this is really good. Like, it has issues. Like, the pass through is black and white, and it's like really low resolution. But just the fact that it's pretty responsive. Most games are fine on it. It has like very good hand tracking.
Hmm.
Like all that put together is very impressive. And the Quest 3 isn't like as good of a value, but I think it does. There's not an argument like it isn't like I don't know if I'm necessarily getting $300 worth, you know, of improvements in it, but it's definitely somewhat justified. Like I don't like I'm glad I got it. It's better. Um, and there is room with the right because really the issue it's not so much the hardware that's in those except the two it's older. It's really just like the UI and apps and stuff is not good, and that's fixable.
Hmm.
And now there's a template for Meta to copy, and
Exactly.
presumably Google and Samsung. We'll see what they do.
So, yeah. Anyway, much like Apple's cutting their expectations for the Vision Pro, one of Apple's own people is cutting and running. The lead marketer for the Vision Pro is retiring. Um, I don't know if this is a sort of forced retirement or if he's just like, yeah, no, this sucked, I'm out. But anyway, Frank Casanova, which, wow, what a name. He's been with Apple for 36 years and now he is leaving. Um, which, yeah, just screams to me, honestly. I get the distinct impression that this was. He probably wanted out after this because people were not even happy with the marketing for the Vision Pro. There was a lot of mockery of it, and there were a lot of complaints about how it kind of missed the mark in so many ways. Like all of the marketing images, the Vision Pro is kind of seen in a dark area. But if you use one in a dark area, like your pass through is awful. That experience is just terrible. Um, and a lot of the a lot of the promotional images obviously like they kind of hide the fact that you've got a battery hanging off the back of this thing. The more you add up, the more people kind of were like, yeah, you know, this was dishonest marketing. And so the guy who presumably was kind of behind that, maybe it was time for to get out because he was given a job that was possibly impossible, and then he did it maybe possibly very poorly. So, yeah, it was time.
I Now I wonder if that's the person who was responsible for that very weird decision leading up to the Vision Pro release, where no one was allowed to take pictures of the battery,
Yeah, that
um,
too.
thereby calling more attention to the battery, which like wasn't even that big of a deal. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, like if honestly, that's one of the things I'm expecting a future Quest headset to have because you usually need a power source or a battery anyway plugged in if you're using these things for more than like an hour or two, or you
Hmm.
just don't charge it between uses. Like they're probably gonna do, and it makes the thing lighter, which is really nice when it's like glued to your face. So I'm honestly expecting Meta to do that now that it's been like a little bit more normalized. People are used to it more, but I don't know. I'm sure it's nice for them in ads when they can show people like, like you've seen it in like the ads they do of people play again Beat Saber. That's what they always show, like people swinging around. There's no cables or anything around their head.
Hmm.
It's all contained.
So, anyway, switching gears entirely, let's talk about Qualcomm. Qualcomm is going to have some new chips coming. we've heard about this. This is not new information. They had it was actually just a few weeks ago that they announced, or I think it was a few weeks ago, they announced the X Plus and the X Elite chips. These are going to be some new, more advanced chips that are aimed at running Windows laptops. They, according to Qualcomm, these are going to be running, or these are going to be so performant that they absolutely beat the socks off of everything that's ever been on the market, everything that will be on the market for some time to come. Supposedly, they are just the impossible chips. We'll talk about why that's BS in a second, but in the meantime, Corbin, do you have anything to say about these chips?
Not particularly. I mean, I haven't read a ton about them. The one, again, like I hope these are somewhat good because I really hate Windows laptops. Partially because like just the state of the laptop x86 chips are not super great, and this would potentially be different, maybe better, but don't know yet. Qualcomm's not given us a lot in confidence with their past like 2 or 3 attempts at laptop chips. The one thing that I think we talked about the last time this came up is they're not saying, have they said the TDP on any of these yet?
No.
Yeah. It's not looking good. It's not looking good, guys. What's the TDP? Is it the same as a Intel chip but with worse performance? Because that's what I'm going to assume.
Yeah, it's certainly not mentioned in the chart that's here. And
that's nice of them to tell me how fast the RAM is, as if that's something I care about.
Yeah.
Not looking good, guys. If you give me a damn, 25 watt TDP chip that then benchmarks as like half as fast as Core i5, I'm gonna be mad.
Mm-hmm. So, The Verge had kind of good and bad things to say about this, but I think it's two things stood out to me. Yeah, okay, so one of which, and this just strikes me as interesting. I'll just read this paragraph. Quote, "What stands out the most about these ARM processors is they do not have a hybrid architecture like Apple Silicon and Intel chips, which divide up their total number of cores into performance-dedicated and efficiency-dedicated cores. Both companies have touted the architecture as a great way to reduce power consumption and increase battery life, and it is. But Qualcomm says all of its Snapdragon cores are, quote, performance cores, and it claims they still beat Apple, Intel, and AMD on performance, power efficiency, and battery life, and that PC games should, quote, just work with Windows on ARM, even via emulation." So I think their efficiency cores would have been too slow to do anything. That's yes. That's what I would assume. I think that's exactly the reason that they did this. Like, I think they're talking total BS here. I mean, I think they're straight up lying, but I think they are lying for the reason you just gave, because if they had put efficiency cores in, they would have basically sat there, and then they would have, like, anytime they got spun up, they wouldn't be enough to really perform any real serious actions. So you'd just be spinning up like 4 efficiency cores just so that they could sit there and consume a little bit of power and not actually do much else.
It'd basically just be like, I would assume if they did that, then it would just be like you shut the laptop and it switches to the efficiency cores. But at that point, then that's taking up space on the die for the thing that's only used for sleep mode. So
now that being said, I could see an argument for putting in like 1 or 2 efficiency cores specifically so that Windows could use them in sleep mode for simple tasks that it it really can just sort of idle through, like collecting email and whatever else. Like things that would be reasonable to run in that sort of like idle state. Because Windows doesn't really have that, but there's no reason it can't. So I could see a good argument for they should have them, but I can see why they wouldn't have put them in yet.
Now, my other theory here would be these chips are going to do x86 emulation a lot. And that's probably not something that would work well on efficiency cores.
Oh, no, I don't think it would work for anything.
And also, I know Intel, I don't know about AMD. I know Intel with their hybrid stuff has like definitely tried to shift apps into, actually identifying different cores and moving tasks to the right one. I know Windows, it has to do some of that on its own, but I'm sure part of it, especially for more complex apps, is like up to the app. But a lot of that x86 software is still built with the assumption of how CPUs have been made for the past decade, where it's like, use all the cores, split all your stuff across all the cores equally, like just, multi-threaded up. So with that assumption, I can see the logic in like, just make every core performance, because like this stuff is not built for that at all. But I mean, like, I guess I don't know how well that's working for Intel, and they've now done this for like 2 generations on the laptop side now. So I would hope things would be good there, but again, I don't know. Again, they're not giving us a lot of info here. I want that damn TDP number. I know it's going to be awful at this point because they're saying everything except that.
Right. So the other thing that
I can't wait for these laptops to come out, and it's just like buying a mid-range Intel laptop. Like there's no there's no benefit to any of this. That feels like what we're getting to.
Right. So the other part of this article that it came next, it goes over 3 paragraphs, but I think the real punch comes at the end. The writer, let's see, who was this? Joanna Niela? Yeah, I'm not going to try saying that last name.
She was my boss at PC Gamer. She was cool.
Oh, nice. Anyway, so she basically said first that the way that the hands-on demo was done was extremely limited. Qualcomm basically chose what software and benchmarks were going to run. Nothing was allowed to run that wasn't in their approved list. And basically in the benchmarks, and bear in mind, this is after Qualcomm has basically said, all our stuff is going to blow away everybody out there no matter what. Turns out, yeah, it doesn't. Even in the benchmarks that they allowed them to run, let's see, they couldn't beat the Apple M3 in single core performance, but they did win in multi-core performance, which, let's be honest, if you just have enough cores, okay, of course they will. And then they weren't even close in competing against Intel's Core Ultra 9 or AMD's Ryzen 9. I'm not going to get into the specific chips. They lost, or sorry, the Intel and AMD chips won in single and multi-core performance. So I'm seeing that, and there's no way not to think, yeah, Qualcomm is kind of full of BS on this. But the real punch is that they only let the reviewers or journalists try one game, and it was Control. Control, I don't know how old this is now. I forgot to look it up, but this is not a new game. This is a pretty old game at this stage, and it was not graphically intense. I played it on Stadia. It was a really like low graphic game, all things said and done. It looks like it probably was over 10 years old. I know it wasn't, but it was also, I thought built by a like semi-new studio. Again, maybe I'm wrong on that, but I'm just going off of what I kind of remember. Anyway, it capped at, or it had an average of 30 frames per second. So, okay, an old game ran at 30 frames per second and it looked good. That's it? That was the thing they chose to show off? Are you kidding me?
Again, this is the thing where there are no ARM Windows games. So you're running everything in emulation, so you're already not going to beat Intel or AMD. It's just not happening. I mean, I will say, like, I've been shocked at the performance of the x86 emulation in games in parallels on my MacBook. Like the fact that I can play Civ 5, which again is not a new game, but it is very CPU intensive, and the fact that it's running in emulation in virtualization on my 8 gig RAM MacBook Air is that seems pretty good. Also runs Fallout 3, which runs like shit on everything. So I think Qualcomm should use that as a demo because that's more impressive.
But
yeah, it's not good. And also the one thing I was checking was they say you said the Snapdragon does not beat the M3 in single core processing, but it does in multi-core. How many performance cores does the M3 have? I think that's got to be part of it, right? The M3 is a mix of performance and efficiency cores.
Yeah,
these are all performance cores.
And that's what I brought up is we don't know how many performance cores, or I don't know how many performance cores were in the chip they were comparing. So, you know, we do know how many cores are in the M3, but and to be fair, actually, it depends on which version of the M3. Even that has multiple versions.
I was gonna check. I was trying to check Apple's website. They just say 8 cores in the base M3, but they don't say what the mix is. I was looking at
true
press release.
I thought it was 50-50, but maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Or maybe they actually no. Now that I'm thinking about it, I think they did run offset. Anyway,
I've got their press release open from when they announced the M3. I put that in the YouTube chat, but I don't see in here where they talk. They say performance and efficiency cores, but they don't say the number anywhere.
Yeah. Regardless, this feels like Qualcomm is holding up probably their highest end chips against, I'm guessing, the lowest end Apple chip. It's 4.4. Okay.
Austin said it's okay. Gee, I wonder why the multi-core is better.
Yeah, multi-core performance is probably going to be better, and that's assuming that they're well, regardless of whether or not they're
when my Dodge Ram has more power than my little compact car. Wow, I did it.
Yeah.
This turns out this bigger, more this engine that's not efficient whatsoever is better at performance.
Yeah. This is looking really bad. I mean, and this is just what we're seeing from, I would say, people who are just reporting on what they're seeing up front in a controlled environment. And they're being speculative and, understandably critical, or at least, questioning it. But it doesn't look good even from this perspective. Now, that's not to say that these machines won't come out and actually end up being fine. They very well could be perfectly good. They might have decent battery life.
I'd love them to be. Love them to be. I'd like, again, I've said this repeatedly, like, I know just by virtue of being ARM doesn't mean they would replicate the very good, like, performance and battery life of Apple Silicon in their MacBooks, but, like, it seems like that would get them closer to something that should be in a laptop form factor. And it seems like this is generally the future and kind of a good thing to invest in. Again, I'd love Intel and AMD to have some competition instead of just like one-upping each other by 3%, every 2 years for the past 30 years. Um, but Qualcomm has also let us down repeatedly. They're still a modem company that got tricked into making SoCs, and they still don't seem happy about it. And also, Microsoft still doesn't seem that super excited about Windows ARM.
Honestly, at this point, I'm starting to wonder if maybe they're trying to work with somebody else to get something rolled out. Or maybe it's at this point, who knows? Maybe they're even just waiting on Google to get things sorted with.
Chrome is native on ARM now. That's good. ARM Windows.
No.
It's been on.
No, I was gonna say maybe they're waiting for Google to get everything sorted out with. Damn it! I keep blanking on the name of it. The other processor architecture, not ARM, but RISC-V. Yes. Yeah, maybe they're just sitting there like, you know what, we should just blow off this whole ARM thing and go straight to RISC-V. That would be hilarious if that was their strategy.
Yeah, I mean, it's so funny because Windows 11 on ARM, again, I've only ever used it in Parallels, so slightly different experience from running it native, obviously, but it's basically the same thing. And the emulation layer, it is not as transparent as Rosetta on Mac. You do have to mess with it sometimes, but it is still very impressive. And that's, from my understanding, without using like the sort of hardware level stuff that Rosetta gets, because the Apple Silicon chips do have like modes that can switch into like x86 registries and stuff to boost that stuff, and Microsoft is doing it all in software, from my understanding. So like, it's fine, and there are apps slowly being native for it. Like Chrome is native on ARM now. I don't know why that took them so long. Again, Google's been selling ARM Chromebooks for like 10 years now, and Chrome is on ARM Android devices, but whatever. But you can tell that they're still not really that confident in it, because the biggest indicator to me is that they won't put it in their own products. They made the Surface Pro X as like a one-off thing that had like a custom Qualcomm chip in it. And then they did I think it was the Surface Pro 9, I think, where they had Intel chips in all of them except the 5G one that they put an ARM chip in. So they were only confident enough where they were like, yeah, 5G is going to suck on the Intel chips. We'll use the Qualcomm one for that one. And then when they just updated the Surface Pro tablets and the Surface Books, none of them have Qualcomm chips. The 5G one is Intel. Mm-hmm. So that tells me they don't feel super great about this still. But they're more than happy to let, Lenovo take another stab at it, or whoever's going to make laptops with these chips. Austin said, I've heard a rumor that Microsoft and Qualcomm have an ARM exclusivity deal for Windows till 2025. Yeah, that was something that I know XDA reported that forever ago. And that was supposedly why MediaTek wasn't trying to do anything. But I don't know when that rumor, what it said the exclusivity timeline was.
I suppose that might also be a reason why there isn't a proper Windows for Apple Silicon.
I mean, that part,
I like could believe me, there are a dozen other reasons I could see that being the case, but that might actually be a good reason why there isn't an actual release.
That might be part of it, but like when I'm reading everything like the Asahi Linux people are doing to make Linux work natively on Apple Silicon, it's like, oh, this is like so different than everything else. Like it's just everything's custom. Like everything is this weird amalgamation of like mostly iPad architecture stuff.
But to be
So
fair, the Asahi Linux people are trying to do something Apple mostly doesn't want them to do. And whereas Apple and Microsoft actually have a fairly decent history of working together, at least when they want to. So, I mean, it's entirely.
I'd like it. I'd love it to happen. If there was native Windows for Apple Silicon and I could boot camp it, I'd go out and buy a MacBook Pro so I could run Overwatch.
Oh yeah,
I'd go do that tomorrow. But that's not happened thus far. So
yeah. So for as much as we've already bagged on Qualcomm for very likely overstating what their chips can do, it turns out yeah, they've already been caught outright lying in their benchmarks. So here's the link to the article. Thank you, Austin, for
is this the semi?
Yeah, semi-accurate. And I apologize. I was like a quarter of the way into reading this when I ran out of time. But I mean, look, I think we've seen this kind of story enough times to basically say this keeps happening. Like every time there's a discussion about performance and benchmarks, someone's probably lying about their benchmarks. We've seen video card companies do it. Or GPU companies. We've seen Intel and AMD get busted for it in a couple of different ways. We've definitely seen it all over the like smartphone space, particularly with like MediaTek has been caught. Holy God, so many times they've been caught. Every major OEM, OnePlus, Samsung, basically all of them, have also been caught with code specifically designed to like overclock their chips the moment that a benchmark is run. Like this is just sort of becoming normal. So look, cheating on benchmarks is kind of the unfortunate and unpleasant average. But at the same time, when you've got a chip that Qualcomm is hyping to be like the second coming of a deity of your choice, like the last thing you should do is get caught out for basically lying and cheating or heavily misrepresenting your chips. So yeah, these are problems. And the part that I managed to get to was basically how Qualcomm had already been called out by Semi-Accurate and I think somebody else. And
yeah, well, they say, I was reading this again. They say, quote, "So what are they cheating on? The short version is that the numbers they are showing the press are not achievable with the settings they claim. Qualcomm is showing a different set of numbers to OEMs, and these are also not achievable with the settings they claim. This information comes from 2 Tier 1 OEMs and other sources. Note to Qualcomm, no, it wasn't him. Really, we knew long before last week. Semi-Accurate is 100% confident in saying that some of the numbers Qualcomm was showing off cannot be reproduced with the settings they claim." So that's basically it. And then they kind of go on to say that like they sort of did this with the last PC chips, the whatever the last Windows on ARM chips was that they made, where they made kind of benchmarks that didn't make sense. So, and then they also mentioned that like these are missing a lot of technical details, which I was just complaining about. Where's my TDP? Where is it? Where is it, guys? I'm starting to think you guys don't want to show me what the TDP is. Is it 15 watts? Is it 25? Did you just... Yeah.
But I do think it also stands out that the story that they're telling here, and we're kind of in that privileged position where we've seen stuff like this happen too, and a lot of times it doesn't really become public knowledge. But if a company gets dodgy And this tells a story of how Qualcomm had committed to have pre-briefings and answer questions and discuss things with press, and then they just didn't. They just chose to kind of blow past that and instead do their announcements and sometimes continue lying or carrying on with whatever claims that they made, sometimes even getting like more embellishing with their claims. When companies start doing that, you know, from our position, we see this stuff happen, and I mean, sometimes we can't do much about it. We don't have any information, so we just sort of have to publish what they claim and move on and hope that, yeah, you know, hope they're telling the truth, or hope that they end up getting busted, which usually means that it ends up being some Redditor that calls them out because they got early access to it or something. But
Right. It's not the classic standard from Best Buy a week ahead of release because they put it on the shelf early again.
Yep. But yeah, I mean, we've seen companies act dodgy, and it's never a good sign. It always ends up coming back to bite them somehow. Not enough usually, but we're seeing Qualcomm exhibiting the signs of a company that is just hoping to get over the finish line, launch something, and they're hoping that enough people don't get a chance to call them out before they make their money. That's not a good practice. But it's also something that they will do it. Intel is super guilty of doing this. Intel's done it more times than I think any of us can count. And now if Qualcomm's doing it, like, it's not good. It's definitely it's almost a regression.
Yeah, and I will say, I don't think this is like conspiracy territory or anything. I think they just forgot. I was not given this embargo at all, even though they've sent me a lot of other embargoes. It might be because I ignored some of the other ones because they were about like, you know, every time I get an email about like, oh, it's the new white label platform for earbuds, I'm like, I can't write a single interesting thing about this, guys. I'm sorry. So maybe I did that too many times and they decided to skip me. I don't know. Or they just forgot, because, you know, companies do that sometimes. But I didn't. I was not in one of these calls. But I've been in many other calls with Qualcomm where they are not super forward with information that people are asking for.
Yeah.
I've definitely been in one call where like one question gets asked like 2 or 3 times by different people, and each time they're like, oh, we'll follow up. I don't think they followed up.
Oh yeah. Well, no, man, I could tell so many stories. I'm still outraged at the I will never not be outraged at the time that I got screwed over on the Snapseed thing. Super short version. I contacted them after noticing that Snapseed hadn't been updated in like a full year, or 18. No, closing in on 18 months. I brought it to their attention, basically said, hey, you know, can I get like a confirmation or an answer on this? And you know, I'm totally open to holding until you've got an answer. So, you know, can we work together on this? And they were like, oh yeah, absolutely. We will make sure that you are looped in. You will get first everything. And then like a week later, they ship an update that had clearly been written, or that they had forgotten to ship 18 months earlier, and they never got back to me. And it's like, okay, cool. Yeah, thanks guys. You're a-holes.
Yeah, not surprising. You know, supposedly these laptops are supposed to show up in a couple months, so they have a few more months of lying until they can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Wouldn't it be something if they end up getting delayed?
That'd be very funny.
But speaking of things getting delayed, so third-party cookies on Chrome not going to be going out quite as fast. they're sticking around a little longer in that privacy sandbox thing. Yeah, that is delayed.
Yes. Okay, so I can talk about this, and then I have like one other blog post I want to talk about, and then I have to leave. So I'll kind of rush through this, or not rush, but
Yeah, I was gonna
this
say
this doesn't need to be 40 minutes.
Yeah, our meta discussion went way longer than it should have.
Because I care about it, no one else does.
It pretty much.
So, the thing with the tracking cookies is that Google's been working on a replacement for third-party tracking cookies for like 4 or 5 years now. I can't keep track anymore. The latest attempt was the privacy sandbox, which is like 20 APIs that all replicate what you could do with cookies, but in a marginally more secure way. And also involved basically shifting the ad targeting stuff from ad networks using cookies to the web browser. So now the web browser monitors your behavior and like assigns ad categories to you. So Google fully rolled out the privacy sandbox like last year. I think they're still like tweaking some of the APIs, but like it's pretty much been out for a while, so everyone's got to play with it. The plan was that they would turn off, I think they already did this, that they would turn off third-party tracking cookies for 1% of Chrome users in the first quarter. I guess they would have done that already because it's now quarter 2. So they were going to do that, and then like presumably at some point, because this is how this works, they would flip the switch for everyone at some point in the future. So now they've said that that's not going to happen. And I meant to pull this up. There was a report that came out a couple of days ago that I believe this is like kind of a response to. Let me grab that real quick. It's the thing with the UK. Here we go. Yes, there was a Reuters article. I'll put this in the YouTube chat. This was the UK's Competition and Markets Authority, the CMA. They were telling Google that they need to make changes here because that this would break. I think their main concern here was privacy of users, more so than like strictly an anti-competitive thing. But basically, the UK was telling them like, you guys gotta change this. This is garbage. So now they've announced today that they are pausing the deprecation of third-party tracking cookies. They said they will not complete it during the second half of quarter 4 like they anticipated. And they say that we hope to conclude that process of talking to the CMA and ICO. I don't know what that is. And they will
the Information Commissioner's Office.
Okay. So their goal now is to get those guys to shut up sometime this year, and then they can keep going. So that's the plan. The privacy sandbox thing has been very interesting, and I'm not as up to date on it right now as I would like to be, but I do know that the as far as I know, the advertising industry is not super happy with this because it's slightly less targeted. They can't be quite as invasive as they can right now, so they're upset.
Well, after they spend all this money buying from data brokers, then you know they still can't make as much use out of it.
Yeah, they're very upset. So I'm gonna break out world's smallest violin for AdMob and everyone else. And then the other fun part is that it's not good for users either, because it's the web browser is now analyzing your behavior and trying to condense you into a couple of categories of interest, like this Cody guy likes cars and a certain category of music or whatever else, and now we can give that to whatever website wants that, so they can target ads to Cody. So it's not really private. Like, it's better than what existed before, but it's very much like we've seen a lot in tech and really just capitalism as a whole, where the market regulating itself doesn't really work. It can like improve it. So this is very clearly like this. This entire effort has been like, this will eventually be illegal. We'll eventually be forced to do something. So let's do something that's like a half step to something good. Um, but it's still not good. Like, it's still the browser like telling whatever website asks for it like details about your behavior so that it can target you ads. Um, and also, as far as I know, Google is still basically alone in advocating for this. So Safari's not putting this in. I'm pretty sure they never will. Maybe at some point in the far future, if like it really matters for something. But like Apple has not been like super happy to appease like advertisers with Safari. Like actually, there's still a one thing that I ran into when I was working on PhotoStack is for the past couple of years, Safari has implemented a 7-day limit for all local storage. So if you have a website and it stores data in the browser, that is deleted after 7 days. If you don't go to the website for 7 days, it's gone. So I have to put a warning in PhotoStack for Safari users. It's like, hey, your watermarks you saved, it'll be gone if you don't open this in 7 days. So please back them up to a file. So there's a lot of stuff like that in Safari. So I don't think Apple will go for this. Mozilla definitely won't. Like, why would they?
Yeah, they've already condemned this.
Yeah, they don't need to do this. And again, it's so much work. Like, this is like 20 like huge APIs that are like changing all the time. So that's a lot of development overhead to do for something that its users don't want. So Google's basically alone. What's interesting is that at least up until now, Microsoft has been mostly aligned with Google when it comes to Edge. Like, Edge is very close to the same browser. They're even like sticking to basically the same move with oh yeah, Carson said I'm getting to Edge. Like, Edge has even done like this, same exact timeline and support stuff for the Manifest v3 browser extension switch, but they're not doing Privacy Sandbox. Microsoft is trying to make its own API, and I linked that in my. Let me see. I'll find my article, but they have their own thing that they're testing that is like kind of a similar concept of Privacy Sandbox. I do intend to like actually look through it at some point and try to write an article about it, but I have not got to that yet. Yeah, here we go. I'll put this in the YouTube chat. Their version of this they're working on is called the Ad Selection API Proposal. And I think it's like kind of a similar thing, but again, I haven't like looked super closely at it. And right now I don't think it's functional at all. I think it's still a proposal. So I think that's interesting that Microsoft is going in a different direction, because also like Microsoft is also an ads company. They have Bing ads, and so them kind of going in a different direction is somewhat interesting. I don't know if that has anything to do with it necessarily, but not good for Google. That ad industry hates it. Users don't like it because it's like marginally better, but also now your browser is analyzing your behavior and just giving it to whatever site asks for it. And also, no other web browser will touch this. So, oopsie daisies.
Yeah, if you're making everybody unhappy, it's a bad sign.
It's very much like, this is kind of also what everyone brought up with the earlier Flock proposal, which was this was kind of like more from is like this is the advertising industry like trying to do a half measure to keep targeted advertisements, because like that is, I don't know if you can do targeted ads while retaining privacy. That kind of seems contradictory. So
I mean, it's like, kind of in the name.
It's in the name, but like, the old way of doing this was like you would build Like it would be based on like audience. Like if that's why I don't know, Disney would have like 5 different channels for different target audiences, and then they would put different ads in those for the kind of people watching that content. So like that's really the closest you could get without like analyzing people's browser history and doing something crazy. So I don't know what the solution here is. This is something like I've thought a lot about. Like this whole web advertising industry kind of seems like a bubble, and eventually it'll pop and I'll lose my job.
I think it's popping now, but yeah,
I don't know. It's also one of those things where like, kind of like, I've watched the movie The Big Short a couple times. I'm now reading the book of that, where it was just kind of this thing that was like slowly exploding, but like no one wanted to talk about it. And that's also kind of the impression I get from web advertising. Is like when I see a website with like, and like, I've seen many websites like this. When I see a website that has like 3 advertisements that are all covering each other, which effectively makes them useless for the advertiser.
Yeah.
But I see a lot of websites with that, and I'm sure they're still generating money when they're clicked, but it's not clear like how much of it is visible or spam or whatever. Like this kind of seems made up. There's not like this is not as useful as anyone involved in this process thinks it is. So that's a fun thing I think about sometimes at 2 a.m. when I can't sleep.
That's why you can't sleep.
That's why I can't sleep. No, I can't sleep because I played VR chat too long.
Yeah, that too. But, well, what I think about, and I just happened to finish reading this article from a few weeks ago. Yeah, about 6 weeks ago. That came from HouseFresh, titled "How Google is Killing Independent Sites Like Ours." And, granted, this doesn't necessarily discuss entirely how sites are making money. But, well, it does and it doesn't. Obviously, like, sites are making money through ads, but they're also shifting more and more of their attention towards trying to make affiliate sales. And without getting into too much detail, some large companies that own lots and lots of websites that shall remain nameless, they very clearly have changed their strategies. They're telling their writers, whom shall remain nameless, that focusing more on trying to do affiliate sales is the strategy now. And how they get people onto the site, those strategies are changing. Where they're focusing their attention, those things are changing because, frankly, the ad bubble kind of is not gone, but it's definitely deflating. So, yeah, you start seeing the value of ads dropping as the focus shifts more and more to basically saying, we don't care what the ad system thinks you want to see and what it tries to show you. We'll still put ads in there in case that makes some good money for us, but we're now going to focus on, you asked for a specific thing, you wound up on our site, we really want you to buy that specific thing through us, and we'll just provide every link you could possibly ask for. And that's how they now want to make money, because they're going to get more from one purchase than they would from a few thousand ad exposures.
Yeah, so I don't really know what's going to happen. I don't think Privacy Sandbox is going to be like tossed out or anything, because ultimately, like, Google is a sizable chunk of the online advertising industry. So, if it's fine for them, then everyone else can just suck it up.
Yeah. Well, and realistically, I mean, just being harshly honest about it, Flock really, there wasn't a big change between Privacy Sandbox and Flock. It's definitely different, but it's not that different. They clearly decided on the path they wanted to go with, and they just at a certain point decide to rebrand it and make a few tweaks.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
The privacy sandbox is like 20 different things, and one of those 20 different things is the topics API, which is Flock. It's Flock, but they like significantly shrunk the number of like identifiable categories you can have, because it turned out Flock made it really easy to dox people.
Yeah.
Because you could end up like, oh, this person likes 1980s like Norwegian pop, and this also one other very niche thing. Oh, they're probably the same person. We can probably unanonymize this person.
You can fingerprint very easily with the right topics.
I'd love to write honestly an article at some point about just all the things that accidentally became great fingerprint tools. Like the one thing I was running into,
it is an interesting novelty information in that fun way.
Like one thing I was running, I rediscovered because I was trying to figure out how to do something, is the battery API in web browsers was one of these. Because along, like, I think it might have been like 8 or 10 years ago, web browsers added a API where websites could check the current battery level of the device, and in theory that's kind of cool for like, I don't know, a game or something that needs to behave differently if you're like below 20% or some other use case. But if you go from one website and a cross tracker script whatever can see, oh, you've got a 1920 by 1080 screen, and you have this IP address, and your battery level was 58% on this one page, and then you went to another page, and it was still 58%, and all the other variables are the same. I think you're the same person. I think we can assign an ID to you.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of stuff like that.
Yeah, or it doesn't even have to be the same battery level. It could do sort of a predictive, it's 5 minutes later and you drop 2%. Yep, same person. Yeah, so anyway, what were we even saying at this point?
Well, I was saying, so that's it. And then I did have this one thing I wanted to like quickly mention that I think is interesting. I wrote a blog post about some of the production pipeline stuff for Tech Tales, the Tech Tales podcast, of which I received a compliment while we are live. Someone said they liked the Intel transition episode in my Discord. So,
oh, yay.
Yes. I had a wild quest to implement chapters in the podcast. This is very difficult for some reason. So the background on this is that Tech Tales is an audio podcast on all the places you can listen to podcasts, and it's also a YouTube video. And now that I edit it in Logic Pro, which has like little markers you can use as chapters, I was like, I can do chapters now. That'll be cool. Real podcasts have chapters. That's cool. Turned out to be very difficult. So problem number one is that Logic Pro only puts the only exports the chapters when I export as like completely uncompressed like WAV file. Instead of the MP3 I was using, because it's a podcast, I save it as an MP3. So first thing is bash script. I use FFmpeg, the classic, to convert that WAV file to the final MP3 and copy over the chapter data into that new file. Works great. Nope, really no problems there. That's what FFmpeg is great at. And because it's in the bash script, actually all the other settings I kind of need are just there, and I don't have to think about like, did I check that checkbox in Logic right? I don't remember anymore. Nope, it's there. It's gonna do a 128 kilobit per second MP3 every single time. I'm not gonna accidentally click 96 again. So that part's great. And that works in most. So basically how chapters work is that there's like a very weird and not standardized at all metadata standard for MP3 and MP4 files, where you can put like titles, and like this is what like every MP3 has. Like it has the title, it has the artist, album art, whatever, and that's where the chapters go, is in there. Not really standardized at all, but like Apple kind of figured it out like 10 years ago, and everyone kind of copied that. So that's how that works. So doing the chapters that way, and that's what the like FFmpeg can understand with MP3s. So I got to that part, and I had chapters working and everything except Spotify, and also I had to figure out something for YouTube. So it turned out the solution to both of these were the same thing. Spotify will not read the MP3 for the chapters. It will not do that. There either has to be like some weird integration in the host that I don't have because I'm using SoundCloud, or I have to put the chapters as timestamps in the show notes for the episode, which is also how YouTube works. YouTube, you put the chapters in the video description, and then they show up. You can click them in the description, or they show up in like the little player thing that pops out. So that would be one solution for both of these issues. But I had to figure out how to get that chapter info into that format. It took several hours. Because I don't want to manually do that every time. That's really annoying. I did that once for like 5 episodes ago, and I was like, I don't want to do that again. That's too much work. So step number 1 of this is FFmpeg has a tool bundled with it called FF Probe that will like take the metadata of files and put it into one of several formats. It can give me like a JSON or an XML file, a bunch of other formats. So I found out I can use that to extract the chapters from that WAV or MP3 file into a JSON file or JSON, format. And then I feed that into a different tool that I didn't know existed called JQ. It's like a JSON parser thing. And I didn't really know how to use it, so I had to use Microsoft Copilot to help me write the like parameters for this. But from feeding that JSON data into that, I can get the exact YouTube/Spotify timestamp format. And then I just copy paste that in the show notes and I'm done. So the actual process for getting this was several hours. But now when I do an episode and I export it, I have a bash script where I run it and I drag the WAV file into it, and it will spit out the finished MP3 file with the chapters copied over. It will spit out the video version, which is a looping video animation that I made with the episode as the audio track. And then finally, it will spit out the chapters in the exact format I need for me to copy paste. And it's all in one bash script, so I click run, and then I go do something else for 10 minutes, and I come back, and it's done. So I wrote a blog post talking about that. I put most of the bash script on GitHub. I didn't put the part that generates the video because I kind of wanted to write that separately, and that might be a different thing. But yeah, that's the fun pipeline. So that now Tactiles has podcast chapters. And once again, FFmpeg is like one of the best command line tools ever. That and like YouTube DL are like a force to be reckoned with. You can do anything with those guys.
Okay. Yeah, these I can't count how many times I've tinkered with or come up with little weird hacks and workarounds like this. Most of my years doing teardowns for AP was a lot of stuff like this. I wrote so many bash scripts, so many Python scripts, all in service to reshaping data in various ways. So yeah, such is the life of a programmer.
Yeah, I know YouTube has a different format, but like I didn't know why it was not showing up in Spotify. That's like the only one that behaves differently. It's so weird. And I did notice that some podcast apps can also read the timestamps in the description. I saw Pocket Cast doing it when I was messing around with it. So there's like some that only read it from the file, and Spotify that only reads it from the data, and then some that can do both. So that's a fun thing. And then also, like, when Apple kicked all this off originally, like, I was going back and reading some documentation to like see if there was anything helpful. When they first added podcast support to iTunes, they had their enhanced podcast format, like for their metadata, which included chapters, which is still the part that like everything supports except Spotify. And they also supported per chapter album art, which I'd completely forgotten about, but I remember like one podcast I listened to back in the day had that. So like the like little artwork would change on my iPod Nano while I was listening to it. And then they also had a thing where each of those chapters, in addition to having artwork, could have a link that showed up above the artwork, and you click that, and it would be like, you know, whatever you're talking about at that time or something. I think the link part is completely vanished. I think that was dropped at some point. Nothing ever supported it. And also, most things do not support the different artwork per chapter, but Apple still does. So there's like a handful of podcasts that still do that.
I think Pocket Cast does, or it can.
I'm not sure. I think I saw one article from them where they were talking about like the chapter stuff. But, yeah.
Well, there's a show. Again, it's the same show. I listened to this one podcast that the one of the people on there actually makes a podcast client and is involved.
Yeah, it's the Forecast app, I think.
Overcast.
Oh yeah. Oh, that's the same guy. They make Overcast, and then
Marco
Forecast
Arment.
is
Yeah.
and then Forecast. Because every time I bring like this up, like someone asks me like, why don't you just use Forecast? And it's like I could, but I also need to generate the video, and then has to happen in a bash script. So I can either use a tool and a bash script or a bash script. So
Yeah.
I'm going to use the bash script.
So yeah. Anyway, yeah, I know that per chapter art is a little bit more available, but yeah, I'm sure a lot of apps don't bother with it.
Yeah, very, very interesting bottomless pit of like weird MP3 metadata stuff that is like half supported by some apps.
Yeah. That being said, I really want to make my own podcast app so badly.
I mean, I've, been kind of annoyed because I stopped using Pocket Cast because I don't really like Automatic all that much anymore, and the iPhone app is just like kind of okay.
I don't think it's even a good app. I mean, it is one of the least offensive apps compared to the many other podcast apps that are honestly kind of, well, they're all terrible. But Pocket Cast just happened to be kind of pretty compared to others at one point in history. And then around the time where the others got prettier, Pocket Cast just never added the really horrible features a lot of the others did. So it's...
Well, and one thing I noticed is when I was using Pocket Cast, I do like that it felt like it was pretty good for both podcasts where like there's a lot of uploads and ones where like I'm not going to listen to this for 3 months and that's okay. Like it'll just be there when I'm ready for it. Whereas when I switched to Apple Podcasts a couple months ago, and it is awful with this. Like it has a, like when I open the app, it has like a homepage that's like the most recent podcast, and then if I want to see like my like unlistened to podcast or whatever, that's like 5 clicks deep. I gotta go. It's crazy. I don't know how they messed up this bad. So
the same way Google screwed up podcasts.
I don't know. Like it's so funny. Like Apple like totally like they popularized this, and they had pretty decent podcast stuff for like a decade, and now because it's uh like an industry now where there's more of them trying to do like paid shows and stuff, and they've tried to integrate all that, and it just does not work well.
Yeah,
Like
truth is, I don't think they
like
were trying that hard.
there's a podcast, there's like two or three shows I listen to where they have a Patreon feed for like extra episodes or early episodes or whatever, and they also do the same thing through Apple Podcasts because Apple Podcasts lets you do that. It's just an integration. But the result of that is that because I have them through Patreon, I see in my main podcast feed like, oh, there's a preview of like an episode I can listen to if I pay for it. But then there's the actual like Patreon feed I have in a different page, so I see episodes twice. A lot. It's great. I love Apple. They get a lot of things right, but they've completely screwed the pooch on the podcast, and it's unfortunate.
Yeah.
At least from a user standpoint, my understanding is that the probably good for like the industry that they're making it easier to like subscribe to the the paid shows or whatever. But as a user, it's not built very well.
No. Which is one of the many reasons I want to make my own, because I have ideas that would be really, I think, incredible, but yeah. Building a podcast app is also one of the biggest undertakings you can do if you want to make a good one. So yeah, I don't have the time to do something quite so ambitious, at least not right now.
Yep.
Okay,
that is it for me.
I figured you were gonna bail.
Yes. Well, have a fun rest of the show.
All right.
Farewell.
I would ask if you wanted to pitch anything, but you've already kind of done several of those.
Yeah, I mean, you can go listen to the most recent Tech Toast because it has Cody.
It does.
So you can go listen to that.
You will hear some of my voice in that.
It has chapters. You can see the chapter. I worked so hard on that.
Get it just so you can see chapters.
I actually made too many chapters, if I'm being honest. It's like 40 minutes. It doesn't need to have 10 chapters, but that's okay.
No, that actually is kind of a lot. I don't remember there being 10 different chapters of topics. I mean, we changed.
There was a lot of stuff to talk about, but a lot of those were short.
Yeah.
But yeah. All right. Goodbye.
All right. Take it easy. We'll catch you in the next one. And very quickly rushed out. All right. So anyway. Wow. Color looks really off. Huh. Real quick, let's just turn down the saturation. I think that got bumped up by accident. Yeah, I might need to tweak that a little bit more. Anyway, so going to kind of semi-speed run the next two topics because, wow, we really spent so long on the MetaQuest stuff. I did not see that coming. Honestly, I thought that was going to be an in and out subject. But anyway, so let's hit this. I think it's going to be one of those sleeper topics. It seems like it should be a big thing, and I think it's going to be mentioned a lot for a little while, and then it's going to quickly vanish again. And we're probably just going to stop hearing about it, and I'll get into why I think that in a second. But so the news is Google is combining its Android and hardware teams. So of course they have to say it's all about AI. I'm just going to say it right now. Forget that. Ignore that part. I don't think that matters. They're just saying that because it's going to boost stock price. It will cease to matter right after this headline. So the basic play out of this is Rick Osterloh is going to be taking over as the leader of platforms and devices. So he will be covering all the different form factors plus basically everything that runs Android. Let's see. One thing actually I'm not entirely clear on. I don't see anything specific about this up here. I bet it doesn't get mentioned. So Hiroshi Lockheimer is the former lead on Android, Chrome, and Chrome OS. So Android is going over to Rick Osterloh. I'm not actually sure if Rick is also going to be taking over Chrome and Chrome OS. I get the impression from this article that those will be going to somebody else. I don't get the impression they're sticking with Hiroshi, but maybe I'm mistaken. Regardless, this is according to the two of them. There was no political antics here. They've been kind of working towards this for a few years, at least 2 years, I think it was. And there's no bad blood or fighting. There was no like plays to take over the other guy's area. And instead, Hiroshi Lockheimer is going to be moving on to, quote, other projects. Now, that could mean any number of things. I'm going to assume that means he's probably going to join some kind of, I'm going to venture a guess, something in the sort of R&D area, because that's usually where Google kind of sends people that have done well in their particular areas, and it's a way of giving them sort of a reward. To put it bluntly, here, move to something that might make tons and tons of money. If you end up making tons and tons of money, you will benefit massively. If you don't make tons and tons of money, well, maybe we'll move you to a different project where you will. Either way, you're still going to get paid lots and lots of money as part of your regular pay. Anyway, the thing is, I'm just going to come right out and say it. This makes too much sense. They needed to do this. Why did they need to do this? To put it simply, Android is mature as an operating system. I mean, it's not bug-free. It's not perfect. They still have tons of work to do. But Android as an operating system is mature. You can tell this because every new version of Android for the last few years has been boring. It is straight up boring. As an operating system goes, nobody cares about most of the updates anymore. You've looked at the change logs. I've talked about them on the show multiple times, and I can't tell you how many times new versions of Android come out, and I sit here, I look at the change log, and I end up thinking, I don't know what to say about this. There's nothing interesting here. Maybe some people have noticed me saying that. Not sure. Regardless, yeah, at this point, my capacity to find new things to talk about in new versions of Android really is diminished. So the thing is, like with a mature platform, do you still need somebody really high up as a direct overseer of it, or could you possibly bundle it in with other projects that they're working on? Or give them new projects to work on in addition to that platform. So, and by the way, just as a side note, yes, there's also the aspect of what developers, like the developer experience on Android, that is not what I would call mature yet. So, yes, there's still plenty to do, but the platform itself is tedious and boring. Austin, you feel like Google shoves them into a lab before they retire in 12 months. Yeah, that actually sounds kind of accurate. I mean, that's, to some extent, that happened to, I'm totally drawing a blank on his name, but it was somebody. Anyway, there's a lot of possibility for where Hiroshi could go. Anyway, I kind of do wonder if maybe the smarter move would have been giving the hardware division to Hiroshi, because, you know, he was successful with the software. No offense to Rick. I'm not trying to take take anything out on Rick here, but Rick technically hasn't been that successful with the hardware division. But Hiroshi really nailed it with software. So, just saying, maybe one was, maybe it would have been smarter to give the hardware division to Hiroshi and see where he would have taken it. Nevertheless, at this stage, I mean, I see this as a good thing. Certainly, we're seeing what is effectively the Appleization of Google. It's that whole vertical integration thing. We're seeing hardware is hard. Yeah, no kidding. That old quote is just never gonna die. But we're seeing the whole vertical integration thing happening here. This is going to be Google. Phil Harrison should have taken over. Phil Harrison. I know that name. I just can't place it. But we're likely to see that sort of playing out. But I don't think it's going to be necessarily overly interesting. And I don't think we're going to hear it talked about really ever again. This is going to come up, obviously, in tomorrow's investor call. So obviously we will hear about it. I think we're also going to hear it mentioned maybe a few more times in like news articles and things like that. But I don't think we're really going to hear much after that. This is going to be Google making an internal change. It will obviously change a lot internally, but I don't think they're going to go to I/O and say, or even at like a Made by Google event. I don't think they're going to show up on stage and say, well, now that we've integrated these two, it gives us the ability to enhance and improve Pixel devices and to optimize for this scenario and that scenario. I don't think we're ever going to hear about this again after maybe basically this year. Like, it'll be mentioned this year and then never again. They'll reannounce at I/O. I mean, it could get mentioned at I/O, and I'll grant it could be it could be mentioned during the Made by Google event. Maybe. But I'm thinking they're going to make this, they're going to downplay this. They want to downplay this. It's a topic right now, and it will vanish because it doesn't do them any good. It's not going to help in any particular way with the branding. And if it becomes too much of a discussion point, I feel like it does alienate partners. Not a lot. I don't think Samsung's over there like quaking in their boots. I don't think there's any issue with Samsung. But everyone else that makes Android devices probably just saw this and was like, we're not sure we're cool with this. And those are the ones that I think probably aren't happy about this. So they won't be thrilled if this just keeps being discussed. Austin, you feel like they'll not have Rick announce the new Pixels anymore? I'm not going to venture a guess. Maybe they'd have Dieter do it? I don't see that happening. I'm not with you on that one. I think Rick will probably keep it up for at least this year. After this year, I could see him moving on. I don't think they're going to move Dieter into doing this. I think he probably has a different purpose. But maybe not. Maybe I'm wrong. Hey, it was... Oh, I'm totally drawing a blank on the guy's name, but there was the one who moved to Xiaomi, I think it was, many years ago. And he definitely did some on-stage presentations after he went there, but that was a little bit of a different story. Anyway, so yeah, my expectation, my belief in this is we're probably going to see this will be a topic right away, and then it'll fade out very quickly, because I don't think Hugo Barra, thank you. Yes. I kept thinking it's an odd name. What was it? I'll never remember it. It sounded like it comes from the Flintstones. What was it? And yeah. And feel free to laugh at the Flintstone reference for Hugo Barra. Which, in case anyone isn't getting why, it sounds like it's not it. Well, it doesn't sound like, but it is similar enough to Hanna-Barbera that's why I think of Flintstones. Anyway, so yeah, I mean, this is an interesting change, and I think it's good. It really will have some impact on both Android as the OS. I think they're going to see more benefit by being closer to the hardware division. And I think likewise we're going to see Pixel devices are probably going to get some minor advantages from being this much closer to Android itself. Does this mean that they're going to break like any like any Chinese wall foundational changes? Anyone who doesn't know what a Chinese wall is, this is not a political statement. It is, and it has nothing to do with China. Look it up and you'll understand. But yeah, within a corporate setting, look it up. That is. But yeah, if they're setting up, or the Chinese wall situation that they used to have between the Pixel team and the Android team, that was already gone. Like, you can listen to interviews that happened with a lot of developers there. They were already like sitting down sharing notes for years already. So that was BS, or not BS, but it was a short-lived separation. So I don't think that's necessarily changing too much, but still being closer together, I think, is still going to have at least some impact. Otherwise, the rest of this article really just leans into the whole AI is good, AI is wise. They do mention, of course, Qualcomm is relevant to this discussion. They mentioned that they're obviously going to be looking at using Android and Snapdragon chips, and no doubt other stuff in other platforms like Auto and XR, so on and so forth. Honestly, like, the whole article kind of goes on into its own world for a while, but it's a lot of talk about AI. Honestly, I think they just really needed to find more ways to talk about AI in this in this announcement, because they know that it's gonna help stocks. That's it. There's just so little to say there. Anyway, so anybody think that I'm crazy for thinking this, or if you have other opinions, go ahead. I'm going to take a sip of water, then move on to the next topic. Feel free to fill in your arguments if you have them, though. So, the final thing for tonight, and Austin, sorry, I did skip. I opted to skip a couple of the things that you suggested, but yeah, this one's interesting. So, TikTok, it is officially on the chopping block in one way or the other. Oh, what does it mean for Fuchsia? That's actually a great question. I forgot about Fuchsia. Damn. I mean, obviously Fuchsia used to be under Hiroshi. Had to be. I can only assume Fuchsia probably actually is dead, isn't it? I mean, not like literally dead, but I haven't heard it mentioned in probably over a year since like actually mentioned by Google, not just in other discussions. I'm assuming that it's probably, I don't know. It's hard for me to speak on it because I haven't been watching like the code repository. I don't know how much is even happening at this point. Is it still in active support? Like, are they still building on it, or is it maybe in maintenance mode where they're just fixing bugs? Or is it even that? Like, is it dead? I'd kind of like to know. But at the same time, I also feel like we're never going to actually hear about Fuchsia again. I feel like the company is done talking about it in any public sense. And this is a different Google than what it used to be. It feels like they've really decided to really corporatize in a lot of ways. And I building a whole separate operating system that really was very building an operating system that was really very redundant to Android didn't make a lot of sense. I mean, it made sense in its time. There was rational reasons for building it, but at a certain point, it was very clear they weren't going to replace Android with it. So if they weren't going to replace Android, why keep building it? And I'm not sure they ever really found a good reason for that. They killed development of Chrome for Fuchsia in January. I mean, that could in theory have a couple of reasons, but yeah, that's not a positive sign. That's a really, really not positive sign. Interesting. So, and if they're killing apps for it, I guess the OS is probably still at least supported, but not necessarily in active development. That would be my assumption if they're killing. Well, but Chrome is pretty critical. I don't know. That leaves me thinking Fuchsia's probably dead. If not already, it will happen somewhere in the next probably year or so. So anyway, let's talk TikTok. So the bill passed. It was a joint bill that basically gave aid to Ukraine, Israel, Singapore, and theoretically other nations that may need basically a defense budget. But as a bonus for this, they decided to add a TikTok ban, or so-called TikTok ban. It is upfront, it is not a ban. I think everybody listening to this already kind of knows this background, but the extremely TLDR version of it is TikTok has the option of either selling the app, selling the app and service to a company that is not in China or another country that would be considered one of our I don't want to say enemies, but basically, that's kind of what it works out to be. So they couldn't sell to someone in Iran. They couldn't sell to somebody in let's say about a quarter of Africa. But otherwise, they don't have to sell to a U.S. company. That's probably where it would go, but they do not have to sell to a U.S. company. And this is something I've seen a lot of reporters getting wrong. They have for sure 9 months to line up a sale, and as long as it looks like a sale is in progress, the president, notably Axios in their post here, gets this wrong. I'll clear that up in a second, but the president can extend that out another 3 months. Now, the reason I say it that way is technically 9 months from now, we will have had an election. So somebody else may not be, we don't technically know who will be president in 9 months. And I say that with every bit of cringe and chill going up my spine. So there you go. Let's see. So the other possibility is if they do not sell to an approved of nation, then yes, what David just said. Then if not sold, TikTok is just straight up banned. Period. End of discussion. Now, how exactly that works is a little bit technically unclear in the implementation sense. What's most likely to happen in a case like that is I'm assuming TikTok's domain name would probably be blocked. I doubt it would be revoked, but it would be blocked in the US. Most likely the IPs that are used for TikTok would also be blocked. And of course the app would be forcibly removed from any app store that deals with the US. Which of course is not a particularly long list, but you know. Anyway, so what happens there? Well, we can go back to that. Anyway, will TikTok fight this? Yes, absolutely. I do not see any version of this story where TikTok does not fight this in the courts. I think they've even said as much. Right now, there is discussion that they might try to fight it on a First Amendment defense, which I've tried reading a couple of explanations for how that works. I can't figure it out. I really have tried. I cannot figure out how First Amendment claims would actually factor in here. Because this isn't the government shutting down voices. It would be the government shutting down a service that just so happens to have a speech component to it. But they're not inherently shutting down speech. There's also the aspect of a company is allowed free speech, and through their platform, that may be their form of speech. However, and by the way, reminder, companies are people, according to Citizens United, which is one of the dumbest rulings in history. But the thing is, if it's not an American company, it is not guaranteed First Amendment rights. Therefore, that doesn't apply either. Anyway, I've tried reading through a couple of different scenarios for how First Amendment claims would work here, and I can't find a legally credible argument for it. That being said, a lot of people hate this idea. They are not happy with it. I do understand that. I don't personally use TikTok. I don't care. I don't personally care what happens to it. But at the same time, I think about things that I do use, and if any of them were to be banned for whatever reasons, I certainly would not be thrilled with this scenario. I'm not saying I would necessarily defend or argue about it, but I get where people are coming from on this. So, yeah, it's fair. With that said, the other defenses apparently that might come up, one is TikTok might try to argue that the whole thing was already sorted out with that weird promise that they were going to let Oracle be like independently auditing their data usage or their data behaviors and how they were storing it. That was always a farce. Oracle, from what I understand, does not even have total access to what's being passed around, so they probably can't do a real audit. There was at one point Walmart was supposed to be involved in that deal, and that just magically vanished at some stage. Put simply, I don't think that that's really going to sell in court either. Because TikTok is still fully in control of the data that is moving around in the US. So I don't think that there's really a compelling argument that they've done anything appreciable to defend themselves there. There's also, let's see, I've also seen counter arguments that are kind of attacking the notion that data is being stolen. And basically the claim is, look, there are already data brokers around the US who are stealing data about, or, spying on citizens and selling that data to whoever will pay for it. Therefore, China could just buy data from them. I'm just going to straight up argue that's BS. Look, the app running on people's phones gives them a lot more access than those data brokers are getting on that size and scale of user. So, yeah, I'm just going to stick to I don't buy some of that defense. Ultimately, what I'm saying is I think TikTok eventually loses this fight in court. Maybe they won't. Maybe I'm wrong. And who knows, when this eventually gets appealed to the Supreme Court, and it absolutely will be, I think TikTok, in my personal opinion, I think TikTok loses that fight, but maybe not. Maybe they do win. In which case, the law could get thrown out of, that particular portion of the bill would be thrown out, and it won't affect the financing for Ukraine or Israel or anybody else. Now, this leads into what happens when TikTok faces a potential ban. I've already talked about this, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time reiterating it. The simple, short answer is, honestly, I still think TikTok's answer to this is really simple. They fund a umbrella company. Basically, they just shuttle a bunch of money through other sources to a couple of basically puppet CEOs or puppet C-level executives. They get together, they form a parent company, they take over TikTok through, a so-called purchase, and lo and behold, you still have ByteDance in control, but this time it legally speaking is going through a couple of other entities first. I don't think that changes anything, but it circumvents the intent of the law, and very successfully. So, do I think anything changes here? Honestly, no. And that's the thing. I don't think this is a change. I don't think that this is going to bring about a totally new and different TikTok. I don't think anything's really going to be appreciably special or better. It's just going to be the company moves its data through a couple more slightly more obscure ways. The people in charge are going to be taking their orders from other people who are more in charge. And they'll have to pay more US taxes, I guess. I don't know. That's it. I just don't think much changes. Because truthfully, there's no sign that anything is going to change here. So that's my theory. Axios, I'm sure, is not getting quite as conspiratorial with it. Maybe I'm wrong on that too, but we'll see. That being said, I really hope that companies that are in competition with TikTok do not get too much of an opportunity to say their own piece on what happens. Because, I just gave my theory that TikTok will effectively just set up enough shell corporations that they can work around the law and make it look as if they no longer, as if ByteDance no longer owns it. However, if Meta and Twitter and Google and I don't know, whoever else, if they get their say, they're going to pick a winner. And I don't see that being a good outcome. That's because they're definitely going to pick a winner that they want. And as good as that could be in some ways, it's probably going to ultimately be in service of giving, of keeping power amongst a tiny group of companies. I mean, realistically, you know who the likely winner would be in a situation like that? I know this is going to sound ridiculous, but it would probably be Microsoft. Because Microsoft has no social network, or no appreciable social network. And they have the money to buy TikTok. They clearly would like to own TikTok if they could. Therefore, in all likelihood, they, you know, who is Google going to pick? Who would anyone else pick? They're going to encourage only existing large entities to own it. Either that, or they're going to pick an investment group that favors them. So one way or the other, like, the competition is never really competition, and that's not a win for anybody. Not that it's a big win if TikTok or if ByteDance continues to control it either, but it is what it is. Anyway, so that's about that, or that's about it for that one right now. I think this one's going to get a lot more interesting in a few months. And who knows, this could even become part of the election debate, which you know what, now that I've said that, I am really hoping it does. I think that would be so interesting. Tic Tacs by Intuit Austin. It's hilarious. It hurts me to my soul, but it's hilarious. You evil, evil troll. I love it. But anyway, seeing as this is undeniably and will forever and always be a political issue for sure. TikTok's escape hatches as U.S. prepares to pass a ban. I wonder if that goes into any of my theory. Regardless, I know that there's no way Biden and Trump will be on a debate stage together. I don't think that's going to happen. And that's assuming Trump somehow evades going to prison in a trial where a co-conspirator has just straight up outed him for committing a crime. Like, plain as day, confessed to a crime. Well, technically, his actions, it's debatable if his actions were technically a crime, but Trump's actions and involvement with him kind of are. Anyway, the fact that a co-conspirator has now just straight up confessed to interfering with an election, I'm just saying, it's not looking good in that New York trial for him. But if somehow Biden and Trump ever actually do end up on a debate stage, I would love to hear what would be said in a debate regarding TikTok. That would be so rich. Especially since Trump has flip-flopped on this subject a couple of times now. So, you know, maybe we'll get this. I want to see it so bad. And it somewhere along the way, no matter what, we do actually need to hear what was going on. Like, what was actually happening inside of TikTok that made everyone collectively agree on somewhat unusual terms. What made everybody agree that they needed to ban this app or force a sale? We got to hear that. The intelligence has to come out someday. But anyway, so with that, my voice is starting to feel the strain. I need to go do other stuff anyway, so it is time to wrap this one up. Thank you all for coming by, hanging out, being part of the conversation. I will be back this weekend with some gaming. That's, the usual routine. As a heads up, I don't know exact dates or times or anything like that, but I will be going up to Portland for an uncertain amount of time, and in all likelihood it will probably at least slightly affect my streaming schedule. I'm not exactly positive, but I think that's fairly likely. It will possibly involve maybe a couple of canceled shows, maybe extras. I don't even know. Actually, now that I think about it, I hadn't even considered this. Possibly could involve special guest, or guests. We'll see. But yeah, I don't know. Anyway, so I will try to keep everybody apprised of what's going to happen, but until I know a little bit more, I don't have more to say. But let's see. For those who are listening and would like to support the channel, links down below to Cash App, Streamlabs, and Patreon. And of course, huge thanks to supporters of the show: David, Austin, Carson, Diablo, and Curvy Mermaid. And yeah, that about covers my spiel. So thank you all for coming by, hanging out, and I will catch you in the next one. Good night, everybody.